All right, welcome back to Grimerica Outlawed. We are excited to have Timothy Hogan with us. He's an author and lecturer within the Western Mystery School tradition. I can't talk today. Past master with several different spiritual traditions, including many bodies in Freemasonry and the Rosicrucian lineages. Grand Master for multiple Knight Templar lineages and runs the Templar Collegia. I've got some websites here, templarcollegia.org, neurobuddha.wordpress is where you can find the tinctures and stuff we'll talk about later, and YouTube at Timothy Hogan 5494. And there's an Amazon link in the show notes for your books too. So thanks for joining us, Tim. Third time is the charm.
Yes, we'll get it right this time. We had some technical problems before, but we shouldn't have any today, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have been really looking forward to this since I saw your lecture in person at the Cosmic Summit. And it's just so fascinating to me because that we are in this revealing happening right now on many different levels. So if you don't mind, I'd love to just jump into the deep end because we'll kind of like work our way back through your backgrounds, or you've done other shows that are super long. We only have 90 minutes here, but my really big question I'd love to start with is why now? Like, why now are the Templars and the secrets, some other secret societies and other things kind of revealing secrets? Is it because, of the internet or of geopolitical stuff, or is it because of that we're coming up to another cyclical cataclysm kind of timeline? Like, why now? What's going on with the reveal?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things going on right now. I mean, one thing is our technology is quickly outpacing our spirituality.
Yeah.
And we're about to enter into, I mean, within the next 5 years, our entire world's going to be completely changed. I mean, we're literally going to have affordable robots in everybody's houses. It's going to be like the Jetsons, and that'll all be powered by AI, and will be, we'll be able to do whatever you want it to do. And I think there's a fear that people are kind of starting to really lose themselves, and and the hope is that this new technology is going to provide a lot more time for people to maybe, hopefully, our hope is to maybe look a little deeper into the mysteries, and so that people understand, have a better idea of who they are and where they come from and where we're going. Otherwise, we're just going to get totally lost in these toys, and we're going to lose our humanity.
That's a great way. I was just thinking of that when you were talking about it. I thought, because if you started revealing some of these ancient mysteries, and it's got a spiritual and a sort of an ancient technological background as well, it will give us more context of us as humans and our humanity and our possibilities. And maybe that'll kind of counteract a little bit of this sort of transhumanism that's happening.
Yeah, I mean, well, and there's lots of other. I mean, one of the great things about our technology is it does allow us to, like right now, here we are in the internet. We're in different parts of the world, and we're able to have this conversation instantly with each other, and record it and make it available to the whole world. And that's an amazing. I mean, that's amazing. If you consider, like, I mean, I don't know. I grew up in the time when phones were still attached to the wall, and and you had to punch in all these, like, all kinds of numbers, extra long numbers, in order to just make a long distance call. When I was a kid. So we're now at a time where again, it's amazing. We can communicate instantly, so it's a good time to get information out. We can get information out quickly without it necessarily being suppressed. Right?
Yeah, I would say that's like the main. I mean, more important than the phones is the TVs and the screens used to be connected to the pipes.
Right.
There used to be people on the other end that controlled what went in and what went into those pipes and what came out the other end. And the internet seems to have, like, really sort of opened up that playing field where we see this sort of peer-to-peer information sharing and stuff like that. So, I mean, in some ways, you could look at it as the arc already sort of coming back up the other side with the technology, because you could look at the dark part, and I'm not saying we're there. I mean, it could get a whole lot worse, and there's a good chance it will. But you could also look at like when we had the TV and the nightly news, and you had a half a dozen dudes that were deciding.
Yeah, it was all controlled.
Yeah, like even this conversation, you know, all this stuff that we sort of talk about now, I feel like in the 90s and the early 2000s was just like they almost had the lid on it completely going up to the age of the internet.
100%. And yeah, 100%. And you know, we're at a time now where I think people are, you know, they're questioning the institutions that they were raised in. They're questioning that, you know, their own government. Everybody's because there's freedom of speech, and we're able to communicate instantly around the world. I think it's going to bring us together more as a global community. And one of the things that the Templar Order has truly believed over the centuries, and part of what we were working towards, was there was a belief that there had been a previous civilization long ago in antiquity that was probably just as advanced as we are now, to be honest, and that the earth was probably as populated as it is now, and that there was a mass cataclysm that wiped it all out and basically, you know, blew us into the Stone Age. And we've been building back from that point ever since. And so here we are again. You know, we're coming into this our own again. We're becoming this world community, but we face the same dangers as that previous civilization had, that was destroyed by cataclysm. And one of the things that's a danger to us, and we're not really thinking about right now, we're you know, we're reveling in our technology, and all of our great accomplishments, and that's great. But people don't realize how fragile civilization really is, and it can be taken away from us almost instantly. And all it takes is one massive solar flare, or you know, another type of asteroid or comet type of impact, and or a pole shift, or a, you know, a number of super volcanoes going off, any number of things, and we could lose it all. And the more dependent we are on it, the more in trouble we're going to be when it's gone. And so in many ways, you know, as a Templar order, we feel like we're responsible for warning people about this and reminding people that, hey, we've been here before, and while it was great, it utterly, you know, when the cataclysm came, it wiped out everything. And you know, we're at risk of that again, 100%.
Is that what these sort of ancient brotherhoods come down to? Because you've got I guess the big ones, at least from the Western standpoint, are going to be the Templars and the Masons, probably.
Sure, yeah. And Freemasonry really came out of the Knights Templar. It was a extension of the Knights Templar. When the Templars were forced to go underground, when they were suppressed in 1307, they had to hide themselves. And one of the ways they were able to hide themselves was as stonemasons, because back then the only people that were allowed to travel from between kingdoms, you know, without permission from either the church or the monarchies at the time, was groups like the Templars, who only had to answer to the Pope, and the stonemasons, because they could go from territory to territory, bringing their craft to build the cathedrals. So and the Templar Order had a whole fleet of I mean, most people think of the Templars as just knights, fighting battles, but actually the knights only comprised about 15% of the Templar Order. I mean, the Templar Order had farmers, they had sea captains, they had clerics, and they had a whole fleet of stonemasons. In fact, they were largely responsible for building the Gothic cathedrals of France and Germany. And so it was very easy for them to go underground and hide as stonemasons. And of course, that's what became Freemasonry. But even if you look at the earliest charters of Freemasonry, I mean, some of the earliest manuscripts of Freemasonry go back to well, there's something called the Gothic manuscripts that goes back to, we estimate, around 1390. But most Masonic documents tend to date back to the late 1500s through the early 1700s. And one thing that's consistent with all of these early Masonic documents is they basically state the purpose of Freemasonry, or its utility of Freemasonry, is to rebuild civilization from after the cataclysm, and to preserve knowledge should another cataclysm occur.
Wow.
So you mentioned the Pope.
That's what they do.
And these guys were answering to the Pope at that time. And nowadays, the Pope and the Vatican seem to be, hiding stuff, or that relationship seems to have changed. So this would allude to that at that time that the Pope and the Vatican were up to maybe good instead of the no good they seem to be up to today.
Yeah, well, I mean, so back then, you have to understand too, when the Templar Order was founded, it was actually started by certain families that practiced an alternative form of Christianity at the time, which was known as Gnosticism. And Gnosticism taught that you didn't need the intervention of a priest to go to heaven, and that anybody through their own efforts could connect with the divine, and that they could have an experience which in Eastern traditions would be referred to as like enlightenment, but in the Western traditions it was referred to as gnosis, which just means divine experiential knowledge. And it was a belief that anybody could tap into this reservoir, the sea of universal consciousness, and could access it and experience it. And so they taught that many of the parables and symbolism that's within the Bible was actually alluding to this process of awakening to this gnosis. Well, this was actually considered a rival form of Christianity to Roman Catholicism during the Middle Ages. But because these families were also preserving the knowledge of where certain ancient texts and artifacts and that type of thing were buried in places like Jerusalem, the Roman Church was willing to work with them because they wanted access to this knowledge at the time. They wanted access to these artifacts. And so the Templar Order was set up. Its public stated purpose was to protect pilgrims that were on their way to the Holy Land. And so they this is what their outward purpose was, while secretly they were also in places like Jerusalem and Egypt and other places doing digging and looking for these artifacts and looking for these lost texts and looking for this lost technology that was believed to have come from this previous civilization.
Would that be the Holy Grail?
That'd be the Holy Grail. Yeah, that's exactly right. And they didn't have to answer to anybody but the Pope. So, they were able to do, a lot at that time relative
And
to other groups.
that's kind of how the Freemasonry, the lineage kind of goes back to the ancient wisdom, because the Templars went back in time in a way to get that ancient wisdom. It's not just that they created this out of their own sort of
That's right.
spiritual, yeah.
That's right. Yeah, and they met with other groups, at the time who were practicing other religious traditions. I mean, there were certainly Islamic groups that they met with who were translating Greek and Roman texts of not only the philosophers, like people like Pythagoras and Plato, but they also were translating alchemical texts. Particularly in places like Alexandria and other places like that. But there was also, so they would meet with these groups. They also met with groups like the Druze, which were a Gnostic group in the Middle East, and the Sabaeans. The Sabaeans were Hermetic group that was out of Haran or Turkey, and they followed the doctrines of Hermes, who was deemed to be the creator of alchemy. He was also deemed to be the person who preserved knowledge from after the flood. So anyhow, they met with these groups and they learned, new information. Mandeans is another group in the in places like Iraq and Iran. And they traveled as far away as they spent a lot of time in Egypt studying in the temples of Egypt, but they also traveled as far away as India, and they were doing, studying things at the temples in India. And then secretly, they were doing travels to the New World of the Americas, where they were also meeting with Mayans and other indigenous tribes of North America. So they had this broad knowledge of the world, and they were looking for the lost technology and the lost knowledge that was believed to come from this root civilization that we would now call Atlantis, or as the Egyptians called it, Utlant, or as the Mayans referred to it as Aztlan. But it was the same. It was the same civilization. It was the same story they encountered everywhere they went, and and they were trying to capture this. And there was along with it, there was a family lineage of that was believed to have been passing down some of the knowledge related to this, that was said to have really gone from Atlantis into the Egyptian mysteries. It had been preserved by the pharaohs and largely kept private from the masses. I mean, the Egyptians, they were making these discoveries themselves in their own land. You could tell when they uncovered things like the Sphinx and
The
other
Osirian temple
places.
down the Osirian.
Yeah, like Serapeum and then some of these other places. They were trying to preserve them because it was so far beyond anything that they were capable of or that they knew of how to do. So they just tried to preserve these places. And and then there were some pharaohs, like in particular the pharaoh Akhenaten, who was considered a heretic by the Amun priesthood of Egypt. He started to break free and reveal some ideas related to the philosophies of this what was believed to be this ancient civilization to the public. And Akhenaten, when he was deposed, his brother Tutmosis took this knowledge into places like Phoenicia. And Tutmosis was Moses, according to the Templar tradition. He was Akhenaten's brother. He grew up in the court. He didn't know he knew the ways of the Egyptians and being in the court, but he was also passing on and preserving Akhenaten's monotheism that he had brought forth to the people. And so Akhenaten's brother Tutmosis, who was Moses, took this knowledge into Phoenicia. There was the Atan, or the Atanai, my Atan, which was the name of the god of Akhenaten. The Atanai ended up becoming Adonai, just meaning Lord in Hebrew.
Adonai, right?
Yep, that's right. And then this ended up eventually developing into Judaism, and it was believed that Jesus later on, and Mary Magdalene and John the Baptist, they were all preserving this knowledge, and they were trying to bring Judaism back to its roots, and you know how the story goes from there. But from a Templar perspective, there was a belief based on artifacts that were found in Jerusalem that when the Templar order was digging in East Jerusalem, they did find a tomb, and in this tomb they found the remains of Jesus, John the Baptist, Mary Magdalene, and their children. And I say their children because the implication is that Mary Magdalene was married to John the Baptist, and they had children prior to John the Baptist's death. And when John the Baptist died, according to traditional Jewish law, the bride, the widow, could stay in the family by marrying, either a sibling or a cousin.
Yeah.
And so he would have married then Jesus, who then picked up the mantle of the work that John the Baptist was doing. And Mary Magdalene was a very wealthy woman and helped be a patron. And then they had children. So, and then those lineages continued to pass down this knowledge, and that's part of how it came to the Templar order to begin with.
Wow. So what are some of the other sort of technologies that we should talk about? What, like some of the main things that you are sort of bringing to light to the world now? Like, I mean, you guys, you found stuff there.
Yeah. So the main things were the main things that the order was looking for early on was arks, like the Ark of the Covenant. It was believed that the Ark of the Covenant was a power source, what we would call now an electrostatic capacitor, where it would build up electricity over several days and then release it through the garlands on the top of it. And when there was an alchemical substance that the Bible refers to as manna, which was actually this superconductive substance that could be derived from a number of things, including you could convert platinum metals like gold into this substance. But when it was put inside the arcs and inside these electrostatic capacitors, it would just produce a tremendous amount of electricity. And if you put those arcs inside these granite temples, granite, especially like rose granite, is because of the silica that's in it, when it's subjected to pressure, it from like weight, extreme weight, it's actually piezoelectric, which means it produces an electric charge in itself. So when you have a electrostatic capacitor in a building that is of this granite material, it can generate a tremendous amount of electricity. In fact, we think that possibly even the Great Pyramid was originally built as a power plant where it would just broadcast electricity into the region if you had one of these arcs
inside
in the
the
center
king's
of it.
chamber, inside the king's chamber.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And if you look at even the word pyramid itself, which is if we look at the Greek origin of this word pyramid, pyramid just means fire in the middle is what it means. So that's exactly what we're creating. We're creating this electrostatic fire in the center, which would be broadcasted in the region, and many of the temples around Egypt and other places around the world actually had these. They were called. They're sometimes called butterfly clamps, but they're these butterfly-shaped indentations between stones around the perimeters of the temples. Almost looking like a zipper that went all the way around the temple.
So those weren't structural. Those weren't structural pieces.
No, they weren't structural. I mean, people think they were there to hold the stones together, but it would actually have to be wider in the center and narrower on the sides if that's what you're going to do. But we find the opposite. In here, we find it narrow in the center and wide on the sides. And these used to be filled with metal, or in some cases wood. But all the ones that would be filled with metal would just act as receivers, for that electricity that was being broadcast. Yeah, there's perfect examples of it. So they would, if you had metal in there, and they were all aligned on these stones that went around the temple. Really what it would do is it would just pick up that electricity that was being broadcast, and it would charge the temple itself. And I don't think they were necessarily using it for lighting, though they may have. But it certainly would have generated a charge at the temple. And so, like anyone going into the temple, if they went to touch one of the statues or something, it would shock them, which would seem like the power of the gods, right? If you didn't understand what was happening there,
So does that mean there must have been a bunch of arcs then, right? There must
have
the Covenant
100%.
They must have been kind of ubiquitous.
Yeah, so the Templar Order found 10 of these arcs, which we currently have in vaults here in the New World of the Americas that we've been holding on to. But but they probably had hundreds of these arcs all over the ancient world. And in fact, we find replicas of them in very diverse cultures from Egypt to Jerusalem to all the way to Japan, and then of course we find it in the Americas too. And so there were probably hundreds of these arcs all over the world, and we think they were probably put at like what we refer to now as world grid points, where there are these these electromagnetic lines of force that go around the planet that are sometimes referred to as ley lines.
Yeah.
And that the temples were built at these node points. And so I imagine this is where they would put these arcs. Sometimes these node points are also in places of strong earthquake activity, which also tends to generate that electricity, that charge from the ground, that could be harnessed and utilized by these arcs, where it can be captured and stored and then diffused, regularly, and that would literally provide free power to the planet. I mean, we could set this up today, I mean. But I think what they did is, oftentimes, like if you go to ancient Egypt, and I show this on our, like I lead tours to Egypt pretty regularly. One of the things we show is on all the temple walls of all the major temples, they have depicted these arcs. And they're being and oftentimes they're being shown on boats. And the reason why they're being shown on boats is because this was the technology that was brought in from the pre-civilization during the from what was known as the Zeptepi, or the original time. There was a belief that it was called a mound or an island in the middle of the water. And this was that land of Utlant, which was later called Atlantis, Utlantis, by when Solon learned of it. Plato's great-great-great-grandfather learned of it from the Egyptian priests, as Plato writes about it. But originally this technology was said to have come from this pre-civilization, and it was brought to Egypt on boats. And so if you go to like the Temple of Horus in Egypt, there's there's actually a depiction on the temple wall of the gods coming from Egypt, or coming to Egypt on these boats from this original homeland. And these same boats are the ones that are depicted carrying the arcs into Egypt to be preserved.
Sounds like there's an allegory from Noah's Ark there too, or
yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's the same. It's the story of Noah's Ark. It's the story of all these cultures around the world that have these flood myths. Yeah, there you go. That's a perfect example. So you see the boat, and then in the center of that boat is an ark.
Yeah,
that's literally an ark box in the center of the boat. So that's one of the arcs. And in fact, it was not uncommon within the Sanctum Sanctorum, and you can still see an example of this at Edfu, at the Temple of Horus at Edfu. So on the temple walls, it describes the gods coming from Utlant to Egypt, but in the Sanctum Sanctorum, or Holy of Holies of the temple, they actually have a replica to this day of one of these arcs on a boat that that area is closed off, it's gated off, but tourists can, if you go there, you can see through the gate, and you can take photos of this this ark that's on a boat in the Sanctum Sanctorum of the Temple of Horus. There. So it was one of the great mysteries. There were probably hundreds of arcs in antiquity.
And you couldn't touch them, right? You couldn't touch them. You couldn't handle them.
You couldn't touch them because they would build up electrostatic charge over a period of days, and then it would be discharged through the garlands on the top. But if you touched it, it would shock you to death. And the Bible even describes this. So the only way to diffuse that charge, and you see this too with the whenever the arcs are depicted on the temple walls of Egypt, you also see this, usually the pharaoh standing there, and in one hand he's putting his hand out, and he has a cone-shaped bread on his hand. This is actually the manna. This is the manna that goes inside the ark. And then in his other hand, he's holding a rod, and this is like Aaron's rod in the Bible. But what this rod was for, it was a grounding rod, so you could put the rod into the ground and drop it against the ark, and what it would do is it would take that electricity and it would ground it. And then you could open up the lid and you could touch it. You could be fine with it. But as long as the ark was sitting there for a long period of time, it would start to build up this charge, especially in the desert, that desert region.
Is that rod right here that he's got?
Yep. Yeah, that rod. That's exactly it. Yep.
So then that cone is that other symbol that we kind of see all over Egypt.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, that cone is the bread or the manna,
which you're making now, right? I mean,
which I'm making. Yeah. So the Templar order for the last last 1,000 years. One of the things that we learned in Egypt and through meeting with groups like the Sabaeans, the Druze, and even the members of the Coptic Church of Egypt and Ethiopia, which is again a different form of Christianity, but it tends to be more Egyptian based. They preserve some of those Egyptian mysteries within it a little bit more than the Roman Church did. Anyhow, from meeting with these groups, we learned this alchemical process of converting. Well, there's actually two processes. One was extracting this mana or these monoatomics out of nature itself. There is a way of calcinating down matter and extracting these monoatomics, this mana out of the ashes. In fact, what happens is the substance is produced deep in the earth, and it's pushed up volcanically, and then it's deposited in the soil, and then vegetable matter will suck it up out of the soil. And animals will eat the vegetable matter, and so this substance is within everything pretty much. But there is a way of calcinating down vegetable matter and extracting it out of the ashes, and we believe that this was really what the metaphor of Moses witnessing God as the burning bush was about. Because you literally have to catch the bush or the vegetable matter on fire in order to burn it to ashes in order to extract this out. We also think this is why at Solomon's temple, for example, they were demanding all these burnt sacrifices. It's because the priests then would collect the ashes from these burnt sacrifices and extract the mana or the monoatomics out of it. So this was one way. This was the easy way to extract monoatomics or this mana. The other way was to convert platinum metals into this mana, these monoatomics, and so that you could take gold. There is a way of taking gold, and you have to convert it into a gold chloride, and then from that or like a liquid gold, not a melted gold, but like it's literally it's in a liquid form, when it's gold chloride. And from there, there's a way of breaking it down through different stages to eventually convert it into this monoatomic, or what was referred to as mana, gold form. And I will say, when you do this, there's something that's very high tech that's taking place, because at a certain stage, the gold chloride completely disappears. The gold completely disappears. And what's happening is it's literally phase shifting into a higher dimension. And then we have to create the right conditions to bring it back into our dimension. And when we do, it comes back as this white powder. It's still gold, but it's every grain of gold has become completely self-contained, where the outer valence ring is completely captured by the nucleus. And so it enters into what's known as a high spin state. And when it does that, it doesn't bind with any other atoms, and it becomes superconductive. And so, and it also refracts light, which is why it appears white. So it just appears as this white powder when it comes back. And this white powder is very miraculous, because it, on the one hand, it's superconductive. So if you put that in an electrostatic capacitor like an arc, it's going to create a tremendous amount of electricity. But on the other hand, the pharaohs actually used to ingest this substance. They would bake it into bread and they'd eat it. And we think this is really the origin of the communion, right? Originally, the original communion was this secret bread that was made of this manna. In the Bible, it was also called shewbread, but it was, and sometimes even today it's called manna bread, even though most people that are calling it that aren't actually extracting the monoatomics and baking it into bread. They're just preserving a tradition.
Did it have health benefits?
It has incredible health benefits. It not only does it raise the consciousness, but it completely heals the body of all kinds of things, in particular cancers. And it works in a way similar to chemotherapy, except for it doesn't poison the body. When people do chemotherapy, they're taking heavy metals, and these heavy metals are killing the cancer, but it also is poisoning the body because it's heavy metals. But when you convert platinum metals into a monoatomic state, they act the same way as being conductive, like heavy metals, but because they're in a monoatomic state, they don't poison the body like heavy metals do. They act totally different, but they do the work of healing. So you can apply it topically and it heals skin cancers like right away. I just talked with I've healed a lot of people with it. I have had brothers who have had tumors the size of softballs in their brain, and they've taken this substance over a period of a month, and it's completely healed them.
In the tincture?
Yeah, in the tincture, yeah. So it's just this monoatomic elements, gold monoatomics in particular, in distilled water.
I've tried both. I've tried the gold and the platinum one that you make, and I'm telling you, the dreams that I'm like. So what's happened to me is I've had these deep sleeps. So now I sleep like all the way through the night. Not that I had a
Yep.
problem with sleeping before, like, but this is just and it's getting me into these long dreams, like almost
Yeah.
like a different. You know how dreams have different levels, and you can kind of get into some where they're more like a real long story with a bunch of
Yep.
people, like you know, it's
Yep.
every night is like these long, intent, not intense in a bad way, just really clear, long sort of adventure dreams in a way. It's very interesting.
Yeah, well, it opens up the consciousness that way. So I mean, you're really becoming more aware of your inner world, shall we say? And that, of course, comes through with dreams, but it also comes through with just general subtle impressions in your waking life. You know, you may start to have more psychic experiences, or you know, just picking up on subtle things that you don't normally pick up on. Synchronicities you may notice more, and that
Yeah.
type of thing. I mean, it's based on the idea. You know, alchemy was based on this idea that really that everything we see around us, and this is going to get a little metaphysical. Bear with me, but is based around the idea that uh, if you're the creator of everything, right, and you're all that is prior to creation, the only way that you're able to create, because there's nothing outside of you to create with, the only way you could create is within your own mind. And therefore, the idea is that our entire universe or multiverse is really with just in the mind of the creator. And just as the creator's thoughts can change, so can our world change.
Yeah.
And so alchemy was based upon the idea of, okay, well, if everything is just mind stuff of the creator, we can manipulate matter and change it and transmute it so that it is resonating more with that mind potential, if you will. And
What effect do we have on the creator's mind?
well, so there's the idea is that in a sense we're co-creators with
So
the
we can
creator,
fuck it up too.
because we're living in his mind, and because we have our own thoughts, and we have free will to interact in this field of mind. We have the ability to also change
Reality.
and in so doing, the creator learns more about itself, right? Because he's unleashed these aspects of himself that can interact, so that he can learn more about himself. Just like, you know, if you're an artist and you do a painting, you know, you get this inspiration, you do a painting, and then you step back from the painting and you look at it, and the painting tells you something about yourself. Or if you're a musician, you know, you compose a piece of music, and you put this music out there, and then you sit back and you listen to it. You know, again, that tells you something about yourself, this thing you created. And so in the same way, the creator, we're like thoughts of the creator in a way. And as we interact and enter into new expressions, and do new things, the creator is learning more about itself through us.
Yeah.
You know, that was the hermetic idea behind it. You know, that was really, and so alchemy was also a process of self-reflection, but it was, you know, it was the science of ancient Egypt. In fact, the word alchem or alchemet, comes from the chem or chemet was the ancient name for Egypt.
Yeah.
And so it was believed to be this science that came out of Egypt, which from a Templar perspective was really that the Egyptians were just trying to preserve it because it was a science that they had inherited from the pre-civilization. And that's why we find all around the world, we find the exact same alchemical processes, even using the same names for substances. I mean, for example, the mana that we're talking about within the Hebrew tradition, we find that same white stone, that same precious white stone in, for example, in Buddhism, where it's referred to as mani instead of mana. So, like, if you've ever heard the Tibetan chant Om Mani Padme Hum, Om's the word of creation. Mani is the precious white stone of enlightenment. Padme is the crown chakra, and Hum is completion. And so it's describing a process of invoking the word, taking this mana or this mani, this precious white stone of enlightenment, and opening the crown chakra. But in some of the early Hindu Vedic traditions, it was said to have been the power source behind what were referred to as vimanas. And vimanas were these flying craft, right? In the Sumerian myths, the Anunnaki, or the gods, were said to have the same flying crafts, but they were referred to as shimanas. What's the common word here?
Mana.
It's mana. You go to Easter Island, the Moai were said to have been moved by this mysterious power that was referred to as mana, right? So we have mana, mani. It's all the same thing.
And along with that alchemical similarity, there's the Cyclopean architecture that has been
100%.
all over the world as well, right?
Yeah, that's right. You find it anywhere from Egypt to Turkey to Peru,
Easter Island.
Easter Island, Mexico.
Like, was
Yeah,
that
it's so this architecture is unique because it's able to distribute high energy in a way that keeps it from falling apart. So it's earthquake proof, essentially.
That's why all those seams have to be so perfect, and it seems crazy to us that they would even bother, but it had an actual purpose.
That's exactly right. One of the great mysteries of the Giza Plateau in Egypt, where the pyramids are, everyone's so busy looking up at these incredible pyramids, which they're really amazing. But no one looks down at their feet. And if you look down at your feet, you realize these pyramids are on these giant platforms. And these platforms are completely created with Cyclopean architecture, where they're fit together like a jigsaw puzzle. And just the amount of effort to have created that platform would have been far more difficult to make than even the pyramids themselves. So it's really something. Then if you go to places like Dendera, for example, the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, there's these massive, if you go up to the roof, literally the top, the highest level of the temple, you can get up to the roof. There's staircases that take you up to the roof, and they're made with some of the stones had to have weighed well over 100 tons, first of all. So how they got them up to the roof is a real question. But then the other thing is they have them all fitted together according to this cyclopedian architecture. So they all fit like jigsaw pieces, which is why they stay up there and they haven't collapsed, over all these centuries. And it's so unbelievable. We don't even know how they did it, quite frankly. And these some people have even believed that some of these temples may have been built by the pre-civilization prior to the destruction.
Well,
And
Dendera's on top of the Caesarean. Is it this?
Osirian. Yeah.
Osirian,
right?
yeah. So the Osirian. So that's at the temple of Seti the First at Abydos, which is at a different temple, but just as impressive. An old temple.
The interesting thing about that one is you could go there and you could go down to the Assyrian and you see this crazy cyclopean stuff. And then you go up to the temple up above that the Egyptians built, which is still pretty awesome, but it's nothing like the Assyrian.
Nothing like the Assyrian. That's right. Yeah.
And see what the Romans built when they got there with them shitty
right.
And you can just
that's exactly right.
Of the technology.
Yes, some people believe. I know Robert Schoch's wife has suggested this, that if you go to a number of these places, particularly like at Karnak, and some of the other temple complexes, certainly the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, the Temple of Seti the First at Abydos, but some of the others, they're surrounded by all these mud bricks, and they don't know what these mud bricks were for. Some people who are a little more open to this idea that there was an advanced technology in antiquity have suggested that these were insulating mud bricks because of the arcs that were being put in the temples that helped to insulate them. Other people believe that these temples may have originally existed all the way back to the pre-civilizations, and they had been buried in mud bricks, not unlike Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, and that all the Egyptians did is they started to uncover them, and then the Egyptians started putting their own hieroglyphs on the walls, and that there was Greek influence on some of that, and I don't know if we'll ever know. One thing I do believe is that there was this tradition of the pre-civilization being passed down by royal families in Egypt. And the reason why I say that is I'm also of the opinion, and the Templar order is under the opinion, that the Valley of the Kings, in the Valley of the Nobles and the Valley of the Queens, where all these pharaohs and their wives were buried, most people think of them as just tombs that are built into the side of the mountain. And they are that, but they're much more than that, because all these tombs are actually connected by tunnel networks that go deep down into the earth, like 200 feet down. And they're super sophisticated. And it would have taken thousands of workers to dig these tunnel networks out. And if you're trying to keep a place secret, it doesn't work with having thousands of workers dig something like this out. So what we believe is that actually these areas like Valley of the Kings and Valley of the Nobles, Valley of the Queens, they were actually originally survival bunkers from the cataclysm. And that what happened is, the people were down in there. They came out of these areas after the cataclysm, and the pharaohs their families preserve the memory of that's where they came out of. And so that's why they wanted to be reburied there. They wanted to be close to where their ancestors originally came out. And the other reason why we believe this is in many of the tombs, the pharaohs at death, they would try to preserve on the walls of their tombs things related to the memory that they were passing on of this pre-civilization. And so they show things like stones being levitated, and they show things like animals that the Egyptians shouldn't have known about. I mean, there's one